Hey, what's up you guys? It's Liddy once again, and on this video I want to talk about my depression story. I think it's a very important subject to talk about, specifically because mental illness is surrounded by a lot of stigma and people don't really understand it. So I want to talk about my story so that if you've gone through it, or you know somebody that's gone through it, maybe you can get a little more perspective on what it feels like and the mental processing that happens and the symptoms that it involves and everything. And I also want to talk about it because if you've gone through it, you can sympathize or you can relate to it and you can feel less alone, because it is something that affects a lot of people, and depression doesn't discriminate because of gender or age or anything. So it is very, very important to keep a close eye onto the symptoms that could happen. And if you see a change in someone's daily routine or how they're acting or the way that they express themselves, and if there's a significant difference, I think it is a sign of concern and you should pay close attention, because depression can creep up on people. There doesn't need to be a specific motive. So depression can be caused by many different things, one of them being a chemical imbalance, and that can be because you are dieting really hard and you're not getting enough nutrients, or because of a malabsorption of nutrients. It can also happen because of a specific situation, such as a death in the family, or just plenty of different factors. So it all depends, and it can literally come out of nowhere. So just because somebody has a fairly good life or had a very nice childhood isn't a basis to determine whether or not a person might or might not get depression, which is something very, very important to understand. My childhood, for example, was fairly happy. I don't have any traumatic events that I can put my mind to, and my whole life has been, it's not been perfect. I'm not rich, but I have been comfortable and I have a good life. Overall, I've had a good life, and I've been very blessed. So in my case, you might say okay, so what was the issue with you? What happened? I think first and foremost, I started seeing signs of depression on myself looking back, because when this started happening, I didn't understand what was going on, obviously. So when I was in my teens, or starting into my 13, 14 years old, I did start to feel different. I felt sadder, overall demotivated a little bit. It didn't get to the point where it affected my grades or my routine, because it was very, very mild. And that's something super, super important to understand. You can have a very, very mild depression up to a very, very deep depression, and they both are very different and affect the people or the person very, very differently. So, and each person's different, so not every single person is going to react the same way. In my case, it was very subtle changes, such as sleeping more, which could be attributed as well to just being an adolescent and needing more sleep because you're growing and all of that. But I did start feeling fatigued when I was in my teens. I felt very tired all of the time, and I think I slept so much, or I wanted to sleep so much, not only because I was an adolescent. I also had signs of depression. It was very, very mild, but still the signs and the symptoms were there, and I can look back and see see the signs of it. I think the major change that happened in my life that pushed me from a mild depression into having a deeper depression was leaving my country. When I was 16, I left Dominican Republic, which is where I was born, and I went to the Philippines with my dad. My mom followed, but a couple months after that, so I was basically in a new country, new culture all around the world, different time zones, everything. Culture shock, there was like a whole bunch of things that happened, and I already had these mild depression symptoms, and that just skyrocketed my depression into such a deep depression. It wasn't from one day to another, but it happened gradually. I was sleeping basically at all times. I didn't have any energy. I had major fatigue. I hated my school. For the first time, I really felt the effects of bullying and not fitting in and all of that. I truly hate this part of my life. Like, I hated high school. Like, my last 2 years of high school, I hated them. I do not like them. I don't find comfort in them. I don't remember a lot of people that were very nice to me in high school. There are a group of people that were really nice and that I had friends, but for the most part, my classmates were like the most disgusting people that I've ever met in my entire life. Really immature. I don't know what each of them were going through individually, because once you grow up, you really realize that every single person is going through their own struggles, and sometimes they project that into other people. And when you see a bully or people that enjoy literally making other people feel bad, you know that there's something that's really wrong with them, not necessarily with you. So that was very hard. And through the first months, I started going into deeper and deeper depression, up to the point where I didn't want to be out in the sunlight. I hated the sun. I hated light. I was literally a vampire. I hated the sound of music. I didn't, sounds would bother me a lot. I didn't want to be around people. I had major anxiety. And the one symptom that impacted me the most, because usually I'm a very talkative person and everything, was that I stopped talking altogether. Like, I didn't speak. I just nodded, and I was there, but I wasn't. And I would say it was a very surreal moment of my life. I've never felt so out of my body as I did in those months that I was in a very deep, dark place. And that's how I would really describe it. Being in a very dark place. You think that everything that happens is bad, that there is no way out. You're literally drowning in a glass of water and there's no corners to grab yourself onto. I felt like I was drowning. That's the most I can describe the feeling of. I felt like I had no support because nobody understood me. For the first weeks, I remember my mom being really pushy and my dad saying that I was going to fail everything, and I was an A student up to moving to the Philippines, and when I got there, everything was so much, I didn't care anymore. I didn't, my mental processing was really bad. I didn't retain any information. I was so tired. I didn't have any energy to actually function like a normal human being. So doing regular tasks like school, it was I don't care, whether I graduate, whether I don't graduate, I don't care, because you're honestly in a state where you really don't care. Taking a shower is that's a major commitment. You literally stop caring about you and what you want in your future. You stop thinking about the future altogether because you don't care to be in it. You really don't want to be here, and you don't want to be there either in the future. So what happens now it doesn't really matter. You don't wish like anything bad to happen to anybody, but you don't believe that anyone cares for you, even if they really do. You stop being smart in terms of like, maybe you had a fight with your mom over something really stupid, and she was having a bad day, and you had a fight with your mom, and that was basically it. But in your mind, it's like you blow it out of proportion. Like, she hates you. You're like the worst mistake of her life. You start like, your mind is brutal with yourself. Like, you really, really don't have any control over anything, and you literally don't care about anything, anyone, not even yourself, which is where the saying comes from, that if you don't care and love yourself, like, you can't love and care for anyone else. And that makes sense, because I went through it and I understand it. And I needed help. Like, once I got to that place that it was so dark that I started feeling like, okay, like, I genuinely started to think about like committing suicide, and I like jumping and not caring about anything or anyone anymore. I just wanted the pain, the suffering, the anxiety, people talking shit, the bullying, the culture shock. I just wanted everything to go away, and the pressure is so much that you start going into that really, that's the deepest part of the depression, where you really don't want to live anymore. Like, you can have feelings of not wanting to live before that, but when you genuinely start researching about ways to not be here anymore and just kill yourself, that is the darkest place that I have ever been in. There's no religion, and I am a very strong believer in God. And at this point, because I was so deep and so down into this spiral of darkness and depression and everything, even though I was screaming for God, I didn't have the peace, I didn't have the faith for Him to help me. You're so down low that even if He was reaching out, I wouldn't have been able to feel Him, because I was submerged in darkness. And really getting this and understanding this isn't a piece of cake. It is quite difficult to explain. I've done, what I can here and there to put out there what like I was feeling, but unless you're feeling it, it's hard to understand being in such desperation that you don't want to be here anymore, that you don't want to live, and you don't care. Like, people are like, oh, people that commit suicide or that, go there are the most selfish people there are. Well, the thing is that you're not really you when you are having suicidal thoughts and everything. When you really like go through with it and you're not, physically here anymore. When you're going through that, you're just desperate. I would compare it to being so thirsty, and that animal instinct or primitive instinct coming out into like desperately searching for that you need, and not only water, it could be food or whatever, and not having eaten or drank water in so long that you don't care. Moral standards blur out completely, because what you need is to be out of this place. And that primitive instinct that I'm talking about it's hard if you haven't been hungry for like plenty of days, or if you haven't been thirsty for plenty of days, but that comes out, and you would just want to give in to finding food quickly or finding water quickly, because you feel like you're gonna die, and it's funny because you feel like you're gonna die, so you want to kill yourself. It's crazy, but it really feels like you don't have a choice. Like, the pressure is so much that it's either you do this or you won't be able to bear it any longer. So basically that's where my mindset was. Thankfully I got the help that I needed. I went to a psychiatrist, I got medication for a couple of months, and I got better and I got well. I did go back into another depression, never as deep as that, but when I moved to Argentina. Once I moved to Argentina, and again, culture shock, everything, I went back into a depression because in this case, particularly not because of culture shock or anything, but because not only was I depriving myself from a lot of nutrients and food and everything, because there was the stigma of being skinny and all of that, and I wanted, to be like them and stuff and to fit in, but there was also the fact that I was falling behind in my studies, and I didn't know when I was going to be able to finish, and that had me like really, really depressed. So I went back to that, also went to a psychiatrist, got medication, got out of it, and then I was once again depressed just before I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And once I was diagnosed with it and we treated like the root problem with diet and supplements and everything, that's when the depression got better, which is why I think that for most of my adolescence, or for years back, I've been having symptoms of fibro and they've been getting progressively worse. I do think it had an autoimmune link to it, despite having a lot of external things going on. I just think that made things a lot worse. It made the depression a lot deeper, but not necessarily did it cause the depression itself. It was just something that worsened it. That's just how I see it. Of course, every person sees things differently, and because there is no way for me to actually know for sure, 100%, I can only speculate. But from what my psychiatrists have told me, my two last psychiatrists told me that there was something really weird about my depression, that I was very, very in tune with reality, and I knew everything that was going on. Usually when you're depressed, you're not really as in tune with reality, you're kind of in your own space. And I was very, very grounded, despite being really, really sad and depressed. And that's why they had this kind of intuition that it had to be autoimmune related, and they just predicted that. And we did find out a couple years later that it probably did have an autoimmune link. So yeah, that's my story. A lot of people have different experiences with depression. Thankfully, I never got into actually, doing anything to myself, actually committing suicide or trying to attempt suicide. But I know of people that have attempted to. I know that it is a very, very dark place to be in, and I just want to put out there that if you're feeling anything like this, you're feeling extremely sad and that there's no way out, to please seek help. There's always something that you can do, and I really, really hope that you do, because this is something treatable. You're not crazy. People go through this and you're not alone, and it's just so important that you take care of you. So if you start feeling any of these things that I've talked about or anything similar to it, please search for help and really forget about what anyone says and take care of you, because that's what's important. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it and you found that it helped you in some way, or that you can relate to it in some way. I will see you guys in my next video, and if you guys have any questions, please leave them down below. Love you guys so much. See you.